All right, we back.
We back. But yeah, I was just telling Peyton, like, we actually came runner-up one week, and
Okay.
we lost on one of the final games. It was like the week where there was just a ton of college upsets. And what I was telling him is there's like a handful of college games, and then there's a handful of NFL games. So
You got some
kinda-
pro ones sprinkled
yeah,
in. Oh,
kinda
that is interesting.
a best of
That
both
does
worlds.
change it a little bit.
A
I'm not
best of
gonna lie.
both worlds.
I'm not gonna be able to help Tracy when it comes to the NFL games.
Oh, I'm gonna get every pick right for Tracy.
Okay, do it for Tracy.
Do it for
And then
Tracy.
We'll go to Bonfire next week on Tracy.
That's not fair. You take your mom out to a nice lunch.
Okay.
All right, hit us with the picks.
Okay, so week 12 of the football pick'em, we have first pick, and this is money line, no spread. This is just straight up.
Straight
who's
money
gonna
line?
win.
Okay.
Yep. So we have unranked Miami at number 9 Clemson. And
That's the U, of course. Ooh, oh yeah.
And I'm texting these directly to her as we say them.
Miami or Clemson?
Miami or Clemson.
Straight up? Oh, it's Clemson. It's Clemson. Well, I don't even know why I thought about that.
Straight up.
Miami
Yeah, Clemson.
Miami's ready to go to Cancun for spring break. I mean, they
But-
are so sick of playing
But
football
if they
this
got
year.
nothing to play for, could be an upset. But
There's just no
Clemson's
chance.
gonna win straight
Yeah,
up.
there's no chance.
Okay, so we got Clemson locked in first pick. Second matchup. Peyton, you're going to like this. We have number 5 Tennessee at the University of South Carolina.
Tennessee.
Tennessee.
I stole the pick for you, you Tennessee boy, but I mean,
It's at
that's the
Williams
weird thing when
Brice,
you
but-
take away the spread. In my head, my reaction is so much quicker.
Yeah. The spread is what makes things a little interesting. But this, I mean, it's if Tennessee doesn't beat South Carolina, I know South Carolina's at home, but if Tennessee does not win that game, whew,
I'm gonna be at that game.
Oh yeah,
this
that's
Saturday.
right. You are.
It's gonna be electric. And if it goes the way I think it's gonna go, on behalf of the Tennessee football team, I want to apologize to all the South Carolina fans. We'll try to keep it. We won't run up the score.
Yes, you will.
Okay, third matchup. It's going to get a little tougher. We have number 7 ranked USC, the University of Southern Cal,
Versus UCLA.
versus number 16 UCLA.
It's both are in LA. I don't really believe in USC. I still think they're kind of frauds. And by that I mean maybe that's just my Lincoln Riley and mixed with
Yeah,
my
you
I
just
hate
don't like
USC.
Lincoln Riley.
I hate USC.
no
That's that
bias.
Notre Dame bias in me.
Yeah, no bias involved though. Like, are you USC or you?
I would go UCLA straight up.
Yeah,
UCLA
I'm
straight
Ryan,
up?
I'm Ryan with Chip Kelly straight up.
Because people are going to pick USC, so I would
That might be
zag
the one
there.
it's not an upset, but that might
Right.
be the one that you can get people.
and
with.
UCLA's quarterback is a dog.
Yeah,
He's pretty
underrated.
good. He's pretty good.
he's pretty nasty. All right, number 4 we have number 10 ranked Utah at number 12 ranked Oregon. I'm out on Oregon.
Well, that's interesting. I'm kind of out on Utah.
Really?
Whoa. Hey, that's my crush team this season. I'm riding with the Utes. I'm going Utah.
It's 2 against 1. You guys win that one.
All right, but we'll see. We'll get these results back.
This will be really
might
fun
be
to
the one-
recap next
this might
week.
be the one
This
where
will
you're
be
like, I
great
told
to
you.
recap.
All right, we're gonna lock in Utah. Okay, next, unranked Syracuse at unranked Wake Forest. I got Syracuse on that.
Give me Wake Forest. I like Sam
Give you Wake
Hartman.
Forest?
Yeah, I'm riding Wake Forest too.
All right, I was
Sam
about to
Hartman's
say
got
either
the
way.
best beard in college football.
I was about to say either way, we're gonna rock with Clay's Wake Forest.
Wow, there was a lot of confidence in me there.
Okay, this is a little different one. You kind of have to pull for the home state, but we have Norfolk State at SC State.
What are these picks?
Hey,
It's
shout
tough.
out my man Jawan Moody.
Yep,
I'm
SC
rocking with
State.
SC State.
Go with it. I don't know anything about either team.
Me neither. All right, we got Navy at number 20 ranked Central Florida.
There was a long pause. I was trying to decide the answer. Let me tell you, the answer is Central Florida. Navy is bad.
Yeah, I'm rocking
Navy
with UCF.
kept it close against Notre Dame in the second half last week, but I'm telling you, Navy is a bad football team.
The thing is their offense. That's what keeps them in the games.
Yeah, because they'll slow it down and limit the possessions, but I just don't. In a straight up world, I don't foresee.
Central Florida should take that.
Yeah.
Okay. We got a few more. So we got Old Dominion at App State.
App, Chase Bryce.
App all day. And it's in Boone.
Yeah.
App.
It's in Boone for sure.
Yeah, they're angry. All right, now we're moving to some of the professional NFL matchups for this weekend. We have the New York Jets at the New England Patriots. I think I'm riding with Jets.
I'm rolling with Sauce Gardner, Jets.
Look, this is the problem. As someone who's been hurt many times by the Patriots in my life, everyone's like, "Oh, the Jets, they're back, baby. The Patriots are
You
dead."
out on the Jets?
I'm not out on the Jets. I just know how this game works. Bill Belichick doesn't lose these games. I want him to, but he doesn't.
He did lose to the Dolphins that one year when the
They
Dolphins
always
were
lose to the
bad.
Dolphins, though.
Yeah, that's true.
Fins up. So what? So you're locking in Pats?
You are really believing in my takes on these.
How about this? How about this?
I'm going with the Pats, but yeah.
We took our 2v1 for Utah. We're gonna take your 1v2 Pats.
I don't love that
We're
move.
gonna spice it up. Okay, we have the Dallas Cowboys at the Minnesota Vikings.
Vikings.
Give me Kirk Cochains all day.
Give me Justin Jefferson, Patrick Peterson. Yeah.
I mean, did y'all see the catch by Justin Jefferson?
Golly.
Unreal.
Dog. Kirk
Dog.
Cousins. Dog.
Which is so weird that he's turned into a dog.
Yeah. It's so
I
I mean, I still don't know if I
They-
fully believe in it, but like, he's more than he's ever been.
And
For
also,
sure.
also they're playing the Cowboys. Other than Jackson Howard, like
which we hope you're watching.
I hope you're watching Jackson, but go Vikings. I don't know what, like your disdain for the Patriots, I have the same disdain for the Cowboys.
That's a very weird thing.
I just don't like the Cowboys. My team's not even in the NFC.
Yeah,
and
that's
like
a
the
strange
Cowboys.
hatred.
I view Cowboys fans like Alabama fans, except Alabama fans have a reason to be cocky. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like
He's coming out swinging with this comment.
yeah, get Vikings all day.
We're gonna move on. All right, we got two more matchups. We have the Chicago Bears at the Atlanta Falcons. I'm going Bears.
I'm going Bears. Justin Fields is tearing it up right now.
That's where I would
Falcons
go
are
to.
just really bad.
The Bears are not great, but they've kind of unlocked something with Fields over the past 3-4 weeks.
And then the last matchup of this week's pick'ems. This is also a total point, so we're going to need total points too. We have the Carolina Panthers at the Baltimore Ravens with a total
Okay.
points addition.
Ravens are going to win.
Yes.
There's no question about that. I'm going to call it 47 points, which means the final score will be 31-16. That math doesn't work. Call it 48 points, 31-17. Yeah, I don't like giving them 17 points.
They got. I don't know.
I think the Ravens can. They'll definitely get score heavy. Panthers though, like
I don't.
Didn't the
17
Panthers
points,
get-
I feel like a
Didn't the
lot for the
Panthers-
Panthers.
Yeah,
Wait,
but
no, they
the-
got P.J. Walker now. No, 31-17. I'm confident in that number.
31.
Yeah, but they had
17,
PJ
48.
Walker and the Bengals like shut him out, didn't they?
I'm not sure. I didn't watch.
I know
that
Joe
game.
Mixon had like 5 touchdowns in that game, 4 or 5.
Yeah,
Is
that
when
was
he
pretty
put
bad.
up 55 fantasy points.
Yeah.
I
That's
had
why I'm
him
saying it
starting
could
that
get
week.
worse. I mean, you got Lamar. I mean, I would take yours.
We're
I'll
gonna
go
lock
with
in.
you.
We're
I'll
gonna
go with
lock
you.
in 48. It just has to be. I mean, that could be what determines like if we win, if there was a tie. So,
Yeah.
I'm clicking sin. Thank you, boys.
Hey, no problem, brother.
Always.
For helping out my mother.
You know, typically we come in with a hot take. I was going to talk about coffee and tea for a minute, but that was better. So we're just going to skip that part, and let's start the show.
'Cause everybody I know is growing old too quickly. And I don't wanna go, no, how am I supposed to slow it down so I can figure out who I am?
All right. So our Bible verse today is found in James chapter 1, verses 14 through 15. It says, "But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death." The author of the book of James, was James, who was Jesus' brother, and he was a leader in the Jerusalem church. He was writing this letter to expose unethical practices to teach right Christian behavior and it expresses his concerns for persecuted Christians who were once part of the Jerusalem church. And so that's going to be kind of what we're talking about today, is this idea of sin, this concept of sin. So.
Yeah. And welcome to Thoughts for Young Men, a podcast by young men for young men. And we are joined here today by Clay, Peyton, and Sally. And we are 3 pastors, 3 young men, 3 guys who invest in young men. And we are breaking down a book aptly titled Thoughts for Young Men, written by J.C. Ryle in 1865. But the lessons are timeless, and we have found time and time again in our conversations about the different subjects. I mean, would be our 6th episode. These 6 different episodes so far, we've talked about some really, really applicable things for a young man, our lives. How do we apply that? How do we teach that? How have we seen that in the people that we lead's lives? Like, I just think it's been so good. And last week, due to some various circumstances going on in our church, I did a solo episode, and I talked about the enemy and just the battle that we're against. I don't like giving Satan any credit for anything that we do. I like to blame my own stupidity rather than Satan, because that means I took some ownership of it, right? But the enemy is still there. We still have to be ready to fight for him, because the goal of Satan is to cause us to sin, to cause us to mess up, to cause us to make mistakes. And we're going to break down some of that and how we've messed up in our past. But I also just know in life, there is no such thing as the perfect life for us. We can try everything we want. We try to be as good as we could possibly be. We can try to be the perfect athlete. We can try to be the perfect musician. Even inside of that, there's still going to be mistakes made, not even on a sinful level, just that's how life is. You make mistakes, you mess up, and you got to figure out how to rebound from it. And interestingly enough, this will be our last section of this section of the book. This is the 5th, if I could call it, almost chapter of his time of exhorting young men. And the whole idea was like, young men, wake up, recognize what's actually happening. Don't just continue to live how you have been, because, man, there's some stuff going on that you have to be ready for. And if you don't recognize that this is the pattern of life that you're living, that I've lived in my past, that you guys have lived in your past, that it's going to mess up your life here on earth, but also for eternity. So J.C. Ryle was just like, man, you guys got to wake up. You guys got to be aware of what's going on. And I think it's been a great section. What's your guys' thoughts on the first, I mean, this will be our 5th episode. And on all those little different exhortations, what have you guys, what stuck out to you guys inside of this?
I mean, what stuck out to me is how this was written in 1863, right?
1865.
1865.
Yep.
And a lot of the stuff a lot of the things we talked about is applicable to today. I mean, different things, right? In here he talks about newspapers and different things like that, but you look at that today and how that social media, like it's crazy, because in history class you learn that history always repeats itself.
Always.
It just repeats itself in different ways. And I think reading this and seeing how it's repeated itself in today, and I would say today it's more rampant. A lot of these things are more rampant today than they ever were then, because of all these different new things that have happened. And so to take this and apply it to today, it's just been really cool for me. And it's helped me kind of think deeper and think wider about all these different things and how it's applicable, and to apply it to how I do ministry in as a whole, from high school to middle school.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I've just loved. It's obvious how deep some of these discussions have been.
They have been some serious subjects. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I mean, what has stood out to me is J.C. Ryle's approach to where you can look at it as like, man, this guy's like really like getting real deep. Like he's kind of like, there's all these like mic drop moments where we're just like, whoa, like he just said that. Yeah. But it still is rooted in compassion. You can see the compassion.
That's good.
That J.C. Ryles has for young men? I mean, I imagine everyone, but in particular, we're obviously talking through the thoughts for young men.
Right.
But although these are very deep discussions, it's all rooted in compassion. That's why we're doing this, because we care about the young men that we mentor and do life with. And if you could just get a smidget out of what we've been talking about, like, it can really change your life and your walk with Christ. So I just, I love how J.C. Ryle breaks down these things, and how, although they're like really packing punches, I love how he just comes from a heart for others in that,
That's
So.
good. Well, then, let's get into the book a little bit. Section 5. Young men need exhorting because of the sorrow it will save them to begin serving God now. Sin is the mother of all sorrow, and no sort of sin appears to give a man so much misery and pain as the sins of his youth. The foolish acts he did, the time he wasted, the mistakes he made, the bad company he kept, the harm he did himself, both body and soul, the chances of happiness he threw away, the openings of usefulness he neglected, all these things that often embitter the conscience of an old man, throw a gloom in the evening of his days, and fill later hours of his life with self-reproach and shame. Sin really is the overarching troubling of our life. We've all seen the effects of it. We've all seen the hurt of it. That might be in our own personal life, where we've seen just how our mistakes have made our lives worse, but it also might be in seeing it in others and watching from afar and seeing how someone's life kind of just crumbles away over time because of the decisions that they've made in their past. But then there's also the other aspect, is where other people have sinned and you have been the one hurt by it, right? Mm-hmm. I can think of several people in my life who made massive sin decisions, and it left me deeply hurt, because they are people I looked up to, they're people I learned from, and I sit here on this side of it going, wow, like, you didn't even realize the pain that you caused in others, but it was there. And I've noticed when someone's life is, when you take time to really look at a person who's had their life wrecked by sin, it does break your heart. Mm-hmm. Like, I think it's pretty easy to go through life and not think about how people's lives are wrecked by sin. In our profession, it's a little harder to go through life like that, just because, frankly, we're just constantly in it, right? We are in it with people. That's what we've signed up to do. That's what we get paid to do, and we embrace that challenge. But for most people, it's pretty easy to go through life without thinking of the sin effects of other people and how it's affecting their life. And that's something you just have to open your eyes to. But when you open your eyes to it, it's going to break your heart. And I think we've all been there on a personal level, where we think about the sin mistakes that we have made, and it leads to having a hard time sleeping at night. That's why I think the mind never stops when you're living in a life of sin. It's constantly trying to get out of the sin pattern. So you can't stop thinking about it. And because you can't stop thinking about it, you can't sleep, and it almost like it spirals you out of it. I mean, when you guys read that section, what's in your mind?
Yeah, I agree that oftentimes, I know in my life, there's been several times that I've found myself in a sin habit, in a sin pattern, and that was one of the biggest lies that I bought into for a long time, was like, this sin that I'm living in only affects me. Yeah. And it took some time to where I finally realized, no, like, this affects my parents, this affects my relationships, my friendships, right? Like, I think we fail to realize that when we sin, it doesn't just affect us. Obviously, we know it affects our relationship with Christ, but it affects those around us, right? Yeah. Like if I have a sin of of anger or rage, right? Like
Yeah.
if I have a quick temper and then I go snap on my parents, right? Like that sin that I'm carrying
Yeah.
is now filtering into
Yeah.
how I treat my parents. So, and I didn't even plan on speaking on this, but we're talking about it now. So that's something now that we've been back in J. Reuben now for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
I've been reintroduced to thinking through those. I've had several conversations with individuals who are literally sitting there and they'll tell you, I've lost everything. I made this one decision that led to that decision that led to this habit or this addiction, and now I have nothing.
Wow.
So yeah, like sin is very real. It's very destructive, and we have to be aware of that and how not only does it affect us, but how it affects those that we love. So.
Yeah, for me, one thing I kind of got out of it was something you talked about, Clay, like seeing the effects of sin of the people around us, or the effects of sin in the world. Like, I think about that prayer, that it's a dangerous prayer to pray, but God, break my heart for what breaks yours. Like thinking about like Jesus, like as he's going into Jerusalem, like he's weeping over the city because he sees it. And I think,
And I don't want to interrupt you here, but I'm going to lose it if I don't.
Okay.
There's an incredible story. I'm not going to look it up and try to tell it exactly right now. But there was, I don't remember if it was the movie The Passion. I don't remember if it was another movie or TV show about Jesus. But I remember there being an actor who told this story where he was a Christian, Christ follower, from what I understand. And he prayed that prayer, and he basically said something like, Lord, let me see for just a moment what you see. And like, I don't know how long he saw what Jesus typically saw, but he said it completely broke me. Like, so I think the guy's,
I want to say that was The Passion.
I think the guy's name was Jim something. Anyways,
it might have been The Passion.
look it up. It's really an incredible story. I'm going to look it up after this just because I'm curious. So sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, you're good. But it kind of brings me to something else. Like, I think one of the tricks, because it's one of the three enemies of the soul, the devil. And I think one of the things that he does, and it's very tactical, I think, he'll make us aware of the brokenness around us, but he'll blind us to the brokenness that's right in front of us.
That's good.
So, like, it's real easy for us to go, well, look what they're doing. Look at what that person's doing over there. But we will never see the effects of of the sin that's in front of us in our lives until, like you said, until we lay our head down at night and we feel it. Because that's what typically happens. He always gives you a half truth. Oh, everybody's doing it. It's okay. You should do this. You should do that. Oh, you're getting angry. Everybody's angry right now. I mean, look what's going on in the world. Like, it's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to pop off at the person who cuts you off on 501 and start going off. But I think that's a big tactic, because I know that was a thing for me. It was a struggle for me even when I wasn't following Jesus. It was real easy for me to go, well, look at what all these other people are doing. But he would blind me to the brokenness and sin that's right in front of me. And so I would neglect it. And then it came to a point where I hit rock bottom, and I was like, oh crap. Like, this has affected everybody.
Yeah. Not
Not just the people around me, but my family. Like you were saying, Sally, like, I think that's a big tactic that he uses today with young men, like all the time.
It's interesting, and I'm not going to go into specifics when I say go into this story at all. But like Sally, I remember when you were a young leader, like a small group leader, you came up to me at some point, and you're like, "Hey, I made this decision. I did like these 2 or 3 things because I just recognized I had a sin habit in my life, and if I don't do these 2 or 3 things, I know that I can't stop the sin habit that I kept participating in." And I was like, that moment, I don't know, it had to be like 5 years ago now. I mean, it was forever ago. But that's the kind of thing. You got to go, okay, like, this is the sin habit I have. How do I get out of that sin habit? What safeguards do I put in? What's the negative effect of me just staying in this? And if you don't wrestle with those questions, you really won't come across the answer of like, oh, this is going to end up poorly for me and for the people around me. Mm-hmm. All right, back to the book. Some men could tell you of the untimely loss of health brought on by youthful sins. Disease racks their limbs with pain, and life is almost a weariness. Their muscular strength is so wasted that the slightest weight seems a burden. Their eye has become prematurely dim, and their natural energy abated. The sun of their health has gone down while it is yet day, and they mourn to see their flesh and body consumed. Believe me, this is a bitter cup to drink. Others could give you sad accounts of the consequences of idleness. They threw away the golden opportunity for learning. They would not get wisdom at the time when their minds were most able to receive it and their memory most ready to retain it. And now it is too late. They don't have the time to sit down and learn. They no longer have the same power, even if they had the time. Lost time can never be redeemed. This, too, is a bitter cup to drink. And I don't know what it is about me recently. Over the past, I would say this semester, I think you guys have heard me say this from stage, at, like on a high school night or some with young adults or anything like that. Like, I've really hit a point that I do believe that the single most underrated skill today is the power of learning. Like, and it's not that I don't think people want to learn. I think people do want to learn. It's just, even if people say they want to learn, that's still underrating how powerful taking the time to learn different things is. I love the phrase, threw away the golden opportunity for learning. I mean, what an incredible statement right there. Like, there's great power in learning. And the power in learning is you don't have to make the same mistakes as somebody else. Or you can do the same thing as someone who's successful. Mark Batterson, he's a pastor out in D.C. He's written quite a few books, and he reads all the time. And he remembers, like, at one point saying or finding out that if you want to be an author, you have to have like 10,000 hours of blank experience to write on that subject, or it was something along those lines. So what he did, instead of trying to gain all those hours to get to the point where he could write and create like he felt like he needed to, or achieve mastery, he read books about people who did that. He basically he expedited his growth by going through the growth process of other people. And I thought it was a great move. And ever since I read that, I was like, okay, that's fascinating. What a interesting way to attack a problem. Like, yes, where we want to be in 10 years might seem like it's 10 years away because it's so hard to reach that point. But if you take the time to learn from people who've already hit that point, that 10 years might become 3 years. You still have to put in the work. You still have to get after it. But your growth could happen three times faster than theirs. And I wanted to write, and I'd be curious if you guys throw some of your things that you've learned from in your young age, as well as I have in my young age, some of the books that I've learned from the most. For me, one of the books I learned from the most was The Divine Mentor. That was the book that got me into reading my Bible. I read it, and it completely opened my eyes to a new way of understanding and comprehending Scripture. The way it was written was, when you're sitting down and reading the Bible, let's say you're reading Psalms, and rather than just reading a textbook-like situation, right, and you're just kind of reading some words, you're trying to get something from it, all right, let me get something from it and move on. He said, picture that you are sitting at the coffee table, drinking a cup of coffee with David, and he's walking you through this in that moment. And for whatever reason, that just little imagery shift changed my whole thing. So when I was reading the words of Jesus, it wasn't me just reading the words of Jesus talking to some other group of people. It was Jesus sitting across from the table from me like we are right now and going, hey, this is how you should live. Hey, this is what you should do. It was a game changer for me. Another book that that really helped me with leadership was Extreme Ownership. The idea behind extreme ownership is ultimately everything comes down to you. So let's say something on our This Gen team doesn't get done. It's easy to blame someone for not getting it done. It's easy to say, oh, they didn't accomplish the project. They failed at this. They failed at that. That's not taking ownership. That's putting blame on others. For me, and learning from this book, now it's like, okay, if someone messes up, what did I do that didn't set them up to be able to do what they needed to do? Oh, I made that mistake. I could have done this, this, and this, and this. So ultimately, it is my fault that this didn't work. And then the most recent book, I really enjoyed this. I read this over my vacation. We did a series that was largely based off of it recently, was The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. I wouldn't say it was one that I learned from the most from I loved it. Like, I really enjoyed the book, but it was different than what I've typically had a mantra of in life. And additionally, it's a book that attacked a problem differently than I expected. So because it came at two different angles than I originally anticipated it going from, I learned quite a bit about it. And then obviously the most important is the Bible. We're going to talk about that in a second. But you guys, like, what are some resources that you've read or, listened to or anything like that?
For me, a book that really kind of changed my life was The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. Yeah. Like, it came at the perfect time in my life, and really read it, and I'm actually planning. It's actually a book that I'm going to reread at the start of every year.
Oh, that's smart. That's a good spiritual discipline book.
To do that,
well,
yeah.
I think that's why I liked it more than I expected it to be. Like, almost. How do I say this kindly? Sometimes people like to use rest as an excuse for laziness.
Yeah.
And I thought that that's where the book was going to go. And I was like, I'm going to hate this because it's be like, oh, you got to rest. You got to slow down. And it's like, shut up. We got to get this done. Like, this is the gospel is way too important for us to just be like, we got to rest, right? But because it attacked it from a spiritual discipline level, I think that's why I was like, wow, that was not the angle I was expecting it to approach from, which means it's perfect, like you're saying, for that New Year idea. Yeah,
I've read most of John Mark Comer's books. That's who wrote The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, and he also has a book that I kind of think is to the topic we're talking about. Live No Lies talks about
it's incredible.
It is amazing, and it lays out like the three enemies of the soul. Talks about sin, different things like that. But I've really found myself starting to listen to podcasts more.
Yeah.
I listened to a podcast from a companion acquaintance that I met through Instagram. He's another youth pastor in New York City at John Tyson's church, called the Reconstruct Podcast.
Yeah.
Tackles a lot about what a lot of students are going through this. We talked about it a little bit a couple episodes ago with deconstruction, but it's all about looking at different topics that are causing so many students and young adults to deconstruct their faith and taking it and spinning it into a reconstruct kind of model of, hey, let's not tear down and break away, but let's look at this and let's see where are the patches in the walls and where can we rebuild but keep that foundation the same. And just different books. Extreme Ownership, I read that, and it was really pivotal for me to learn how to take ownership of mistakes that you make, rather than, like you were saying, Clay, passing blame, taking ownership. But really reading and just being a sponge is just a season that I'm in right now. What about you, Sal?
Yeah, Clay, you'll appreciate this, but one of the books, haven't read recently, I'd love to pick it back up, but a good leadership tool was actually when I interned for the first time. I know that through the internship here at The Rock, we went through the book, How to Lead When You're Not in Charge. So that was a big resource for me along the lines of with leadership, just because I think that is where we can get ourselves tripped up sometimes, is thinking that we have to be in charge to have authority and to be able to lead.
Yeah.
Whereas this book just walks through like, look, you can lead without the title or the position or the authority. You can lead right where you're at. And that can be encouraging to some of our viewers who are like, hey, I'm just like a high school kid, right? Like,
Yeah.
or I'm not the team captain on the team, or I'm not the president of this club, right? Like, you can lead right where you're at. And I think that book for me was a good resource. And it's kind of cool because when I first read that book, I was an intern. Now being full time, I'm in a different season, so that's
Yeah,
kind of
for
why I
sure.
would like to revisit that a little bit. But that was just a cool leadership tool for me that you introduced to
That
me.
book was a game changer for me.
Yeah,
it's
it's a really good book.
I couldn't believe how much I was able to pull from that one, just because when you're young, you feel like if I'm not in charge, I can't do anything.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's such a lie.
such a lie.
And if you really start to open your eyes to the opportunity that's in front of you, man, there's some great stuff.
Yeah.
And I want you guys to hear this, like, if you're watching, if you're listening, like, if you're wanting to get more knowledge, if you're wanting to get more wisdom, if you're wanting to get better at life, the number one book that you can read is the Bible.
Yeah.
Let's start there. Yeah. All these other books are great, but if you don't have a chasing after the knowledge that God provides through his word, then you're missing the whole point of all of it. Mm-hmm. Extreme Ownership is a great book, but it doesn't compare at all toward the Bible. Like, everything you could ever want to know is in Scripture. So remember that and attack that, and find a system to read the Bible that works for you. Whether that is in the mornings, in the evenings, with a devotion, whether it's through journaling, whether it's through reading a chapter a day, whatever the strategy is, as long as you're reading, I don't care what the strategy is. Yeah. I told you guys that from a leadership side. Like, I don't care what do I like when we're all able to talk about the same thing. Yes, that's great. But as long as you're reading your Bible, I don't care what you're reading, because you're getting what you need to hear from God. Mm-hmm. So that's such an important thing.
And I think also just, we're talking about the power of learning. It really just boils down to, like you said, wanting to learn, like being teachable and coachable. I know we've talked about this in the past. I'm sure it'll come back up in future sessions, but just learning to put our pride aside and admitting when we're wrong, admitting when we don't know everything and have it all figured out, and taking those opportunities to learn. I think sometimes that could also be a hurdle. I know we talk
100%.
Like, obviously a lot of us want to learn, but that pride, it can really set us back to admit our flaws and admit that we don't know everything, and then taking those opportunities to learn, like you said, the Bible first and foremost, right? But even from
100%.
Even from wise counsel, those who are around us who can help us kind of figure those things out too. So just being coachable and teachable goes a long way.
It goes
with learning
so
too.
far. It really is. I do think it's the most underrated skill.
Yeah.
Because I think I figured out why it's the most underrated skill. Oh my gosh! Like, I was, those like light bulb moments.
Yeah.
Like, I just, bing. Like, okay, so here's why I think it might be the most underrated skill. Because if you are willing to learn, to take the time to put the work in, to read, to listen to a podcast, to take coaching, to take teaching, to work on yourself, as you were talking about, like, if you are willing to do that, if you're willing to learn, that means your pride is out the door. And that we've said it on this show, on this podcast. The reason we make so many mistakes is because of pride. I actually think our next episode is all about pride, if I remember right. So, like, I'm excited to talk about that. But when you're willing to learn, you're literally just saying, okay, God, like, you got it. You got control. You handle it. And I'm going to be humble, and I'm going to learn. Mm-hmm. That's why it's the most underrated skill, because for once you're saying, hey, I'm not everything I feel like I'm cracked up to be. Man.
You know what that kind of reminds me of too? Paul. Man,
that's good.
you like, I've going back to quiet, like, I spending time with Jesus. Like, I've read all Paul's prison letters, reading through Acts, and a couple, I'd say last week, I read about his conversion story and how like he was a chief Pharisee. Like he knew the Torah.
He was the a guy for the
like,
Jewish people.
Like he knew the Torah. But if you go and look at that, I don't know, I can't think of exactly what it said off the top of my head, but I'm a paraphrase, but it basically says that like before he even went out and did anything, he took the time to learn from the apostles. Here's a guy who in today's world would have had his doctorate degree, all this stuff. The 10,000 hours you were talking about, he probably put in 15,000 hours.
Had them,
like
for
he
sure.
had all the knowledge, yet he took the time to say, hey, I'm going to humble myself and I'm going to learn. And I think as followers of Jesus, like I think we have to have that ability to that spirit of, hey, I want to learn more. I want to grow more. Because if we don't have that, then we're just going to get to a point where pride takes over. It's like, hey, I got it all together. I don't even need Jesus.
And if you aren't willing to learn the sin habits that you've developed that we've been talking about, they're never going to go away because you're never going to learn
Exactly.
why they're bad or how to fix them. Golly. So learn. I mean, go read a book.
Stop watching TikTok in class. Pay attention.
Pay attention. I tell you, I wish I would have paid more attention in Bible college. Like I learned a lot, but like looking back then, I was like, I still treated it a little bit like school. And now I'm like, man, if I would have really invested my energy, man, I could have had so much more knowledge. That would have been so sweet.
Some of the wisest words that I ever heard from a teacher, parent, mainly a professor at Bible college. I had to take a freshman seminar class. I wasn't a freshman, long story, but first day he said, from this point on till you graduate and even further on, be a sponge. Be a sponge and soak up as much as you can. Not just in the classroom, not just when you go hear a sermon or hear someone preach at church, but when you're in your small groups, when you're talking outside a community, be a sponge and learn as much as you can. And ever since I heard that, I've kind of taken that into my life, and it's helped me learn.
Yeah,
But
that's really good. You know what one of the greatest inventions of all time was?
what's that?
The
Oh boy.
the sponge with the handle.
Oh yeah.
That has the soap inside.
Oh my goodness.
You just like press the little button and it like
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Like what a game changer for the cleaning game.
for real.
That's what you get on this podcast. You get great conversation about God. You get some football pick'ems. And you get to learn about the advancements of the sponge.
That's why we're here.
I love the sponge.
The possibilities are endless for the sponge. One day there's just going to be a sponge that just, I don't know. I don't even know. Whatever.
Back to the book. We're off topic.
Way off topic.
I just killed Peyton with a comment I just made.
Oh man.
Others, I got to refocus. Oh man, we're idiots. We need to learn more. Others could tell you of grievous mistakes in judgment from which they suffer all their lives. They had to have it their own way. They would not take advice. They formed some connection which has been altogether ruinous to their happiness. They chose a profession for which they were entirely unsuited. And they see it all now, but their eyes are only open when the mistake cannot be retrieved. Oh, this is a bitter cup to drink. I just caught this, even though I studied this. It is interesting that he keeps mentioning this idea of this bitter cup to drink. Like this is probably the third or fourth time he said that. I wanted to reference back to they had to have it their own way. I mean, we just went into a big discussion about this concept, but I mean, that is pride dominating our life. And people think there is power gained on trying to do everything on your own. That you have this superiority to other people, but that's just not the case at all. What I have found is I think there's actually more power in recognizing that you can't do it on your own, because once you recognize you can't do it on your own, you're relying on God's power, but then also the power of believers gathering together everyone having their own gifts, everyone having their own abilities, everyone having their own things that they can bring to the table, and everyone is in it now. And if us three are trying to get something done, it's going to be more effective than just one of us getting it done.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I think even just when you're talking about completing just everyday tasks, or times of serving, things like that, like I think it's important to mention here when we're talking about this concept of doing things on our own, like burnout is a real thing. Sharing and confessing your burdens is important, right? Like I know one of the biggest tools that I've learned is sharing burdens with one another. Like because I know we're talking more of like maybe tasks and things like that, but like even when it comes to wrestling with your struggles or maybe seeking counsel about things, it's good to get that stuff out and share that with other believers, because it kind of divides up that burden, When it comes to completing a task, I mean, we just said if us three had a task to complete and we did it together, not only would it be more effective, but I mean, it would probably take less time. It would be done better. So I think just when we realize that doing things on our own is least effective and we take the time to bring others in to help us, I think it really, like you said, it goes a long way with helping it be more effective. I love that.
Yeah, it's kind of going along the same topic. I'm preparing a sermon in 2 weeks for the young adult night or young adult ministry. And I'm talking about the concept of community and why community is important. And I think this is huge, because I think what tends to happen is we think that when we follow Jesus and when we're doing life and we're doing things, it's me and Jesus in our little bubble. Yeah. And it's just me and him and we're here. But the more I look at Scripture and the more I've been studying this through Acts and just through looking at Jesus and the disciples, like Jesus himself did life in community,
right?
With 12 other guys, and then even within that, he had 3 that were his inner circle of like, hey, the gardener gets, hey, I'm deeply troubled. Like, I need you to pray with me. I think for me, a lot of the times in this concept, that's where my pride kicks in. And I don't know if you guys have like experienced this as ministers sometimes, but I'm open about how pride's one of my biggest sin struggles. Yeah. And it's the hardest thing for me when like I think about, well, I have this degree in pastoral ministry. I've been to Bible college. Like, I know it more, but I have to humble myself and go, nah, like I can't do I don't know everything. Like I don't know everything. Like, one of my biggest things that I love to do is when I write a sermon or anything, like I send it out to people. I'm like, hey, don't just tell me what I want to hear, but help me figure this out, because I want to eliminate that pride. And I want to be able to say, okay, no, I don't have it all together. Like, I need people in my life. I need accountability. I need these different things, because without it, that's where your mind goes. Well, I don't need people. And I think it starts there. It's like, I can do this on my own. Yeah. But then it turns into, well, I don't really need God. Like, I can make my own decisions, do my own thing. And you go down that road, you're not going to like what you find at the end.
You're not. And if you go down that road, the truth is, when you get to the end of that road, guess who you're going to be with? Nobody. Because nobody wants to be around it's a little harsh, but it's very true. People don't want to be around someone who's super prideful. There is an element like people are prideful, that's a sin. So people are naturally around people who are prideful. But like, if you are truly like unbelievably arrogant, then you are going to find yourself lacking a community that's around you. Not because people don't want to be around you necessarily from a spiritual side, but it's just like when they get around you, they know that you are only in the relationship for yourself. And the bad part about this is it's kind of like a cyclical thing. And maybe we don't need to go into this as much, because I know we are going to talk about pride heavy next week. But the recognition of pride, when you notice people aren't in your corner as much as they used to be, you're going to become more prideful because you're going to go, oh, I don't need them. And it's going to be even more focused on yourself. So you got to do everything you can to fight against that. And thankfully, before we dive into this further, because I'm going to preview for next episode, come back for next week for more tips on pride. Because I think we've been talking about the issue of pride a lot today. We have not tackled how to fix your pride super hard today. And I think there is a lot of things that we can do, because as young men are probably the most prideful people, just in general. There's just something about
dudes and pride.
The testosterone. I don't know what it is, but
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a major, like, we're going to walk away next week going, wow, we all needed to hear that, even as people who are teaching it in this circle.
I'm
Yeah.
pumped.
Next week we're really gonna have to learn.
We're really going to have to learn next week.
Really gonna have to.
All right, back to the book. This is a long section. Just I'm going to give you guys the heads up right now. Just get ready. Young men. I like to imagine, John Chuck Ryle just kind of standing on the corner, like, young men, right? In his weird pantaloons or whatever they were called back then. I wish you did but know the comfort of a conscience, not burdened with a long list of youthful sins. These are the wounds that pierce the deepest. These are the arrows that drink up a man's spirit. This is the iron that enters the soul. Be merciful to yourselves. Seek the Lord early, and you will be spared many a bitter tear. This is the truth that Job seems to have felt. Man, Chuck loves himself some Job. He says, you write down bitter things against me and make me inherit the sins of my youth. So also his friends afar, speaking of the wicked, says, the youthful vigor that fills his bones will lie with him in the dust. David also seems to have felt it. He says to the Lord, remember not the sins of my youth and my rebellious ways. Beza, the great Swiss reformer, felt it so strongly that he named it in his will as a special mercy that he had been called out from the world by the grace of God at the age of 16. Go and ask believers now, and I think many will tell you much the same. Oh, that I could live my young days over again. He will most probably say, oh, that I had spent the beginning of my life in a better way. Oh, that I had not laid the foundation of evil habits so strongly in the springtime of my journey. It's a fascinating section right here. And I don't know why this phrase came to my brain when I was reading this. I don't know if this was God trying to tell me something that I've been really thinking about recently, and maybe it's because of our high school and middle school camp theme that we've been working on already. When you are at your youngest, you are at your most dangerous. For worse, meaning the dangers of sin are very real when you're a young man. But at the same time, it's also for the best. If you could just harness your danger and utilize it for the good of the gospel. Was it Baker Mayfield that said, I woke up feeling dangerous?
Yes, it was.
Like, how awesome would it be to wake up each morning and go, I'm feeling dangerous today? Like, there's something in our heart. Look, we don't want to be soft and pudgy. Like we don't want to be a bag of milk in this life. Like, we want to be people who can do something, that can make a difference, that can go into a fight and accomplish something. And I'm not necessarily talking like an actual fight, but like the spiritual war, waking up going, yo, I'm going into war today. I got my sword. Let's ride, right? Like,
Let's ride.
Broncos country. Let's ride. When you are at your youngest, you are at your most dangerous for the worse, which means you can make some massive mistakes that could really negatively affect your life. But also, you're at your most dangerous for the best, which means you can go and make a bigger difference than you could ever imagine.
Yeah, I would agree. I love how we quoted two of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL right
Not a great quarterback quote situation, but it worked though.
It did work.
It got the point across.
It worked. Like, I think part of the reason, why J.C. Riley is addressing young men with this is because I think when we're young, we're the most susceptible to things. Because you don't, like, I can remember when I was younger, like, people would ask me to do this at a party, like all these different things, and I didn't think. But like quoting back to a verse I quoted on one of the earlier episodes, Paul, like when I was a child, I thought like a child.
Yeah.
Like when you're young, you don't think about the consequences of your actions. You just kind of you do it. But you think about it like in terms of another verse of scripture says like life's but a vapor. It's here today and it's gone tomorrow. Like life is short. And I think what tends to happen is when we get older up, I know for me, I had this effect when I first, started following Jesus. I was like, wow, I wasted a lot of time. Like, and I wish I could go back. Like I found myself even wish that, man, I wish I could go back and just do it differently. But I think the reason why God kind of lets things happen the way they do is so that we can be here right now doing this, like helping you guys out to say, hey, like harness that. Like there is something in all of us, I think, that we're risk takers. Like I think most dudes are risk takers. And we like to take risk. And waking up feeling dangerous, say, you know what? Like there's a war, like you were saying, Clay, there's a war going on. Man, let's go. Like I'm gonna go into school and I'm gonna be radically different than everybody else around me.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do things right. I'm gonna start living like Jesus, because Jesus woke up feeling dangerous every day. Like just to adopt that attitude. Like I was reading in Acts, Paul is in a city. A lot of the priests and Pharisees conspired against him. The whole town stones him. They stone him. They think he's dead, and they throw him outside the city. And it says that he got up. My bad, forgot to add. It says that the other believers came, helped him up. He knocked the dust off his clothes and went back in to the city. If there's anything about feeling dangerous,
that's a baller move. That's
feeling dangerous, but I think that's the attitude we have to have, is to understand, like, you know what? We're going to mess up because we're all sinners. We're all born, we're broken. But to not lay down and take the stoning, but to get back up, knock the dust off, put the bandages on, and say, you know what, I'm going back in.
Yeah.
I'm going back. I'm not going to throw in the towel, but I'm going to keep going. And I'm going to keep going and keep doing what I have to do so that at the end of my life, I don't have to have like those regrets that they had. Like, I wish I could go back and say that. And I know there's a lot of people with stories who they got saved at a young age, and like they can say different things. But I know for me, I feel that sometimes, and that wish to kind of go back and redo it. But to have that attitude you're talking about, just wake up feeling dangerous and go back into the city and keep being obedient.
I mean, that's a cool feeling. How much better a feeling is that than the shame and regret that we've been talking about of sin, right?
Yeah.
Like what a better life that is.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you, Peyton. I know that was a line that you kind of touched on, was like, oh, that I could live my young days over again, and I agree with that completely. But I also kind of have this different aspect of like knowing that, like you were saying, like God uses those pains and those struggles. Like I do ultimately believe without that season of bad decision making, of rebellion against God's will for my life, I don't think I'd ever be sitting here today.
Right.
So there is that aspect of like, I know there was a lot of missed opportunities, in my younger days. I know there was a lot of time where I was in complete rebellion of God, but it was through that brokenness and through that hurt and those struggles that ultimately led me to my relationship with Christ. And so
and the way to say that might be, use your past, don't dwell on your past.
I love that.
Like
that's good.
Yeah.
Like don't get so hung up on it at this point. Like unfortunately, and this sucks for you and for me and every person who's ever sinned, so everybody except Jesus, there's nothing we can do about our past.
Yep.
But we can do something about what we use our past for.
Yeah, and another part of this where it's talking about laying the foundation of evil habits. It's like you said, we just have to, if we've laid our foundation on evil habits, on sin, we have to remodel. We have to tear that house down, and we have to start back and lay a new foundation.
Yeah.
With Christ being that cornerstone of that foundation. And I know that's what I've had to do, and I know that I'm still we're always still working, still remodeling. There's always going to be habits, struggles that come up.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who you are, whether you're in ministry, whether you're in school listening to us right now. Like, it doesn't matter what walk of life or where you are on your faith journey. Life's always going to happen. We're born, we're naturally born sinners, and so we're always going to have to be kind of checking ourselves, throwing that pride out the window, and constantly rebuilding and remodeling. So this was a great section. This whole section really
it's been
really hit for me.
Yeah, and man.
One more thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
It just popped into my mind when you were talking about the past. So when I played football, our coach, Coach Jordan, shout out Coach Jordan. He was cool.
Shout out Chuck.
Shout out Chuck.
Elder of the church. Shout out.
Shout out. He had this saying for us, even in practice, even in the weight room, after a loss, after a win. It was an acronym called FIDO. Forget it and drive on.
I was going to say, I've heard that, but I didn't know what that meant.
It means forget it and drive on. And he always used, like in practice, he would use it to say, oh, you messed up in practice? We would just lead each other and say FIDO. Forget it and drive on.
Yeah.
You mess up in a game, forget it and drive on because there's another play. Right? Like, I think you kind of, when it comes to your past, you have to have a short memory but not a forgetful memory. Like, short memory in terms of like, okay, yeah, I messed up, but I'm going to keep driving on. But I want to remember that to be able to look back in tough moments and say, well, I was there and now here I am there. Just wanted to give that little acronym for everyone listening. Like, yo, you mess up, just forget.
And I think that's a good point. I don't think I don't know. Scripture does say forget your past and look towards it. In context, I think when I think about that, scripture that says forgetting what lies behind, I think that's a little bit, don't dwell on it.
That's what I get from it.
That's why I would say that the angle from that is what that's Paul. I think that's Paul that writes that. But there is a part like, don't forget your past, like, because as soon as you forget sometimes if you forget, like, you'll fall into the trap of doing it again.
Yeah, you can't learn from what you forgot.
Yes, that's a great.
And I think, like you said, in context, we should forget it, like you said, in the sense of not dwelling on it, because when we dwell on it, we're not recognizing that we're made anew in Christ from that mistake. So, for sure. All goes back to learning.
There's a reason
today is a big learning day.
There's a reason why in the Old Testament they would always put markers of important places.
Stones,
they're
all
not
that stuff.
Yeah, they're not dwelling on it.
Build
but
altars.
when they come back across it, they can remember, this is what God did here. I that's what I get from that, is that idea of like,
it's very good.
Make something that you remember it, but you don't dwell on it.
Well, and straight up, that's part of the reason we often do like we give something out at camp, typically as a take-home item, so that you can look back. Okay, what did I learn? What did I gain? What did I move on from at that camp experience?
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest, boys. We're gonna skip ahead a little bit because I think the other stuff that's in the midst of this chapter, I think we're gonna attack it in some other areas of the book. And I mean, based off our whole conversation that we've had, this last little paragraph I think sums up everything we've been talking about. It is just like the perfect ribbon on top. It says, "Experience," says the proverb, "is a hard school to attend. But fools will learn in no other. I want you all to escape the misery of learning in that school. I want you to avoid the wretchedness that youthful sins are sure to entail. This is the last reason why I exhort you." In my words, the challenge I want to give to you guys before we go on to our question and answer portion is this. Learn, work hard, be dangerous, Raid hell.
Raid hell.
That's
Raid hell.
as simple as it is. Do those 4 things and just get after it.
Get after it.
So that concludes this section of Thoughts for Young Men. Mr. Payton,
All right, y'all boys ready for the question of the day?
I'm ready for the
I'm ready.
question.
Let's get into
All right,
it.
here we go. So, question of the day this week came from a high schooler last week with
Yep.
a solo episode. How do I overcome my anxiety?
It's a great question.
It's a great one.
And I think it's a great question because there are loads of different levels of anxiety. So let's just address that off the top.
Yeah.
I want to address that off the top. Like, there is like seriously like medically you're struggling with anxiety. And then there's like, I have an anxiety because I have a big test tomorrow, right? There are levels to this. So I want to address that first. So if you have, I'm going to say this on the front end so we can attack it on the smaller scale. I feel like this is probably one of the better ways we can do this is if you deal with like heavy anxiety, go see a doctor. Do some therapy. Go through all those routes. We are not. I definitely want to say this. We are not professional counselors. We have no degrees. We have no doctorates. We have nothing like that. So recognize, like, it's okay to go see a doctor about that. It's okay to see a therapist about that. I know I have done both. It's great. It's good for you, right? That's, I would say, on the super medical side. Like, some of you may need to do that, right? And there's no shame in that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's normal. That's part of life sometimes. Like, just like some people deal with, and I struggle to use this word, but I think it's the right word. I think while some people deal with other forms of illnesses, there's also the illness of anxiety, and that's just sometimes it is a straight up medical thing. I know one way I described, some people have a negative view on therapists and going to therapy and all that. I heard one person describe therapy, a therapist, as a brain mechanic, which I was like, oh, that's pretty good. Like, so if like you're struggling with the idea of like sitting down and talking about your feelings, and you're like, I don't know about that, but you're like, I like a car. Sometimes there's just things that you need to fix in your brain.
Need an oil change every once in a while.
Every once in a while, you just need an oil change.
Sometimes you need that tune-up.
Right. So think if you struggle with the idea of sitting down on a couch and pouring out your feelings to a therapist, don't look at it that way. Look at it as like a brain mechanic. All right.
Yeah.
That might be helpful for someone. So I wanted to say all that on the front end.
Yeah.
You two, I mean, I would love to hear your guys' response on the front end of that. On the not that we have to go all the way to like just for a test, but just on the smaller. I don't even want to say smaller scale. On the non-super medical attention side, how would you guys do it?
Yeah, I know for me, anxiety, I also just want to point out this. Whoever asked this question, props to you, because you asked a question that I'm sure everyone else has.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
For sure.
Because statistics-wise, I mean, you're talking
A lot of people.
You're talking even post-COVID. Yeah. Anxiety levels are through the roof.
Yeah.
I know that's a struggle I have daily. A lot of my anxiety that I tend to get leads to a lot of self-criticism, self-doubt, worry, things like that. And so I don't want to go like crazy down like I just want to talk about a way that kind of combats anxiety for me, something that has really helped me. A lot of my anxiety just gets rooted in negative thoughts. And I know in the past, before I used this tool, which call it a tool, it just works for me. In the past, things could literally bother me for up to days at a time. Like, I mean, I would say one little thing that many people would be like, oh, that's not a big deal. I would literally let it rob me of joy for days on days. Now, things, for instance, that used to bother me may either no longer bother me, or it comes down to just, hey, a few minutes of like, I'm kind of in my head a little bit, and then I'm able to kind of forget it and drive on. But for me, one of the biggest...
Shout out Chuck.
Shout out Coach.
I just want to say, like, what's worked for me is just not allowing those anxious thoughts to take residency too long.
Yeah.
You know, we were talking about dwelling on the past. A lot of that is a lot of what used to bother me really bad was just when I would let those thoughts just fester and and grow. You almost think of it like seeds, like the enemy plants that little negative thought in your mind, and the longer that you let it sit there and the longer you think on it and dwell on it, all you're doing is just watering that seed and allowing that thought to take root, you know? And so for me, something that I've learned is just to combat, if we recognize that they're lies from the enemy, we have to combat it with truth. And so a lot of times whenever I get like an anxious thought or a negative thought pops in my head, whether it be self-doubt or whether it be of worry or anything like that, I just try to combat it with Scripture. Like when the enemy plants that lie that I'm not enough, I come back with Scripture. Like, nah, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, right?
Yep.
And so like I find ways to almost refocus, which is what we're called to do in times of anxiousness and things like that, is to refocus, transfix our eyes back on Jesus. Come at those lies with truth. And I just want to say, whoever's asking this question, I wish that I could say that the anxiety can just disappear, that anxious thoughts will never pop into your mind again. Like, it just doesn't work that way. But so like we can't control when those thoughts and that anxiousness or anxiety hits, but we can control our response to it. And so really and that works for me. What works for me is just recognizing the lie and then combating it with Scripture, combating it with truth, praying about it. Like Jesus calls us to cast all of our anxieties onto Him and He will give us rest. And so that's something I've been doing in this season that I'm in, and it's helped a ton. Like I said, I've noticed that the time that I dwell on thoughts and the amount of time that I let a thought rob me of my joy has definitely gone down a lot. I've definitely been able to, to push through it a lot better. And it's just finding whatever that tool or whatever that practice is for you to kind of combat that anxiety.
Yeah.
So.
And I'll jump in and give I'm going to give one like just super practical tip, and then Peyton, you can do the wrap up here. I think I think a lot of times we feel anxiety when we're stressed out and we feel like we have a lot on our plate. Sometimes we don't even actually have that much on our plate, but it feels like we do, right?
Yeah.
I've been there where it's like, oh my goodness, I have so much to do. And then you kind of realize what you actually have to do. And you're like, oh, that's not as much as I thought it was.
Or you get it done like a lot quicker.
Oh,
than you
so
thought.
much quicker, right?
Yeah.
So whenever I feel like your natural reaction when you're dealing with anxiety for a lot of people is to crawl into the hole. Let me use the analogy of crawling under the covers, getting back into bed, right? Going to play some video games, procrastinating, maybe the right word. Sometimes the best thing you can do when you're dealing with anxiety is just get crap done. Like, if you're going, man, I feel so overwhelmed, make a list. I go, what's the most important on this list to least important? Reorder it and just start cranking things out. I know sometimes when I've dealt with anxiety about stuff that's going on in my life, sometimes just making a list and checking things off and going, okay, I'm accomplishing things.
Makes you feel a lot better.
Makes me feel a lot better, right? And that's a super, super practical thing. But I know in my life there's been definitely times where that's helped me fight anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so for me, I have to struggle with anxiety. Probably started struggling with it heavy when I got into high school. And before, I didn't really talk about it as much. I think that's the first step.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing to talk about for sure.
It's not, because everybody, this might be a bad take, but I feel like everybody at some level feels anxiety in their life.
Yeah.
At some
and
level.
that's a good point. It is an emotion, which means we all have it in some form, right? And that's part of the reason I wanted to separate a little bit of like the medical stuff versus like the emotion of anxiety.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not an emotion, maybe it's a feeling.
Yeah.
Everyone has that feeling.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's important to recognize the differences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so definitely talk about it. Like, don't be afraid to talk about it. The second thing that I do in moments of anxiety when I'm feeling it is, one, it's a spiritual discipline. it's when I say it may shock you, but to sit in silence for a few minutes. Like actually sit in silence and do another discipline, which is ponder, right? Like David says, I'm going to take your word and hide it in my heart, right? As what we talked about, as you're diving into the Bible and you're reading, internalize these scriptures. Yeah. Internalize, I think it's either 1st or 2nd Peter, but cast all your anxieties on him. Why? Because he cares for you, right? Like, so I internalize scripture, and in moments of anxiety, I silence my thoughts. I get in silence so that way those anxious thoughts, they're not taken captive, but when I feel it, I'm shooting scripture into my brain. Yeah. I'm letting the Spirit kind of do its work. So I would say that, and I would say too, just spend time with the Lord. Spend time with other people. Let people know. Reach out to people. Hey, I'm feeling real anxious right now. And let them kind of talk through. Like I know for me, sometimes if I'm feeling anxious before a sermon or something like that, I'll talk to Drew, my girlfriend. I'll be like, hey, I'm real nervous. And she'll kind of talk me down. I'll talk with my mom. Like there's different people in my life that I can talk through. And just talk through it and actually think out loud. And think like, okay, let's assess the situation. Let's whatever it may be causing your anxiety. Let's look at this situation not from. You use this example, Clay. I'll let you kind of talk about it because you used it the other day in our This Gym meeting, talking about the sniper. So you want to talk about that because I don't want to mess it up. Yeah, but I think that's a good kind of last little tool that I would say I use when I fighting anxiety.
I think when you are feeling overwhelmed, I think overwhelmed was the term I used, which is a very similar feeling to anxiety.
Yeah.
Yes. There are 3 steps I think that you can do that will drastically help you. First is slow down. You've already touched on that, so I'm not going to go into detail on that. The second thing I think is super important is step back, because what's going on in your life might feel like it's all consuming and it feels like the entire picture. If you take a step back, you're actually able to see more than what's going on right there in that moment. I don't remember what it's called, but there's a type of art where it takes a bunch of little pictures and makes one giant picture. And a lot of times life is like that, where you feel like all this emotions and anxiety towards whatever might be occurring. And if you just hyper focus on one area, you will easily, there's construction going on somewhere. It's all good, right? If you just hyper focus on that one little part of the picture, well, you're missing the rest of the photo. I talked about this in a Quest blog this week for our reading plan. Peter was freaking out when Jesus was on trial, and he denied Jesus, but it's because he was freaking out in that moment. Jesus was on trial, and he wasn't freaking out because he could take a step back and go, I'm on trial, I'm going to die, but guess what? I'm going to raise from the dead, and I'm going to be all good, right? And then the third thing is to separate. There's different ways you could look at this. From a leadership angle, we talked about feedback. Separate the good feedback and the bad feedback. In life, I think it's separating what you can control and what God controls. And the moment you say, okay, I can't control that, God's got to control that, there's a relief there.
And I think that's the key when it comes to anxiety. Like, I think that last point, sorry, that was my laptop. But, like, looking back, and I think that's where I think this plays into, because I think anxiety does cause you to not take a step back, but you're so hyper-focused on what's happening in the moment, you don't take a step back. But I think assessing, saying, okay, am I in control of this? Can I control the outcome of this situation? And if I can't, and it's something that God can control, I'm not gonna focus and worry about it, because there's nothing that I can do.
There's nothing I can do about it,
and that's where true freedom's found.
Exactly.
And at the same time, it's not having your hands completely out of there, because you still got to do what God's saying. Hey, do this, and do this, right? And if we aren't taking the step to do those things that we're also missing the point. So we got our part. He's got his. So do what you need to do and trust that God will do what he will do.
Submission and obedience.
Yeah, that's a great way to simplify what I just said for a long stretch.
Yeah. But I think it's good for them to kind of see that example and see those steps. Because, like, when I was when I was like thinking through my answer to this question, like I was like, I'm gonna have Clay talk about those 3 rules.
Yeah.
Because like you explained it a lot better than I
I would
probably
love to go into depth about one of the sections, which is the stepping back one's hard when it's audio based.
Yeah.
Even through our YouTube feed, there's no way for me to properly explain it.
Yeah.
But let's just say the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan was a key point of the teaching process.
Yeah.
Because I'm gonna try to explain it because I do think it's important.
Yeah.
Opening scene of Saving Private Ryan, and they're storming the beaches of Normandy. People are just getting slaughtered. Yeah. And if you're in there on the ground, you feel like bullets are flying all around you. Your anxiety's high. You're freaking out. You're like, I'm going to die at any second. I'm going to get taken out by a sniper or machine gun nest or mortars that are coming down and hitting all around me. You are in a bad spot. Mm-hmm. And if you're right there in that moment, you're going, well, I ain't going to win. We're screwed. But if you take a step back, if you were to take an aerial view of what was happening up and down those beaches in France, you would go, whoa, wait a second. While it might feel like we're getting slaughtered, our guys are actually advancing.
Yep.
Our guys are actually taking the beach. We're going to win, right? But you would never, you don't see that while you're on the beach. Mm. You just got to do what the people actually on the beach of D-Day did, which was just keep moving forward and trust that it's going to work out, right? And that's a huge factor of it.
Mm. Oh, yeah.
All right. That's another episode of Thoughts for Young Men. As always, we leave you with one final phrase. Raid hell.
Raid hell.
Raid hell.
Thanks, guys.